Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. Now that BP05 Omens Eternal has released, we're going to be looking at some of the Omen-based decks from the set. So first up, who are the Omens? The Omens are the 10 cover characters for Omens Eternal, named after them. We're going to be looking at sort of dedicated decks based around each of their strategies. They all have a package of cards surrounding them that want to work with them to achieve one strategy. We probably won't be looking at dedicated decks for the 1st or 10th Omens since they are neutral and can kind of splash into any deck as support. But the other 8 will be taking deep looks at decks sort of based around them, starting with the 2nd Omen, Lishenna, the Omen of Destruction. Lishenna presents a sort of new type of strategy for Rune, where it is a control deck, which they're familiar with, but instead of being a control deck with a combo finish, it's a just very grindy, heal-based, chip burn damage-based control deck with amulets as a win condition. Unlike some of the other Omens who have traits that already exist and can support existing cards from the previous sets, Lishenna focuses on the Idolatry trait, which is exclusive to BP05 so far. These are the only 8 Idolatry trait cards and tokens, so they pretty much just work with themselves, and we'll be playing some of the generic rune support from the previous sets to support them and enhance this strategy. Before we look at the deck list, as always, this is just meant to be a starting point, especially since we're, only a few days into the Set 5 format. Testing time has been a bit limited. And yeah, there's a lot of options to mess around with. So take the starting point, change some of the numbers, change some of the cards, play around with what you're comfortable with or what could be good for your meta. Especially since the main tournaments for the Set 5 format are mostly going to be limited to local metas instead of larger regionals. So take this as a starting point, work from there until you're happy with it. Looking at the deck itself, you'll see a lot of familiar rune cards, Merlin, Agnes Tachyon, the usual. In addition to a lot of the new cards from this set, Servant of Destruction, Destructive Refrain, Monochromatic Destruction, Lishenna herself, lots of new cards actually. So pretty good mix. Also lots of neutral cards, which I don't know that you've seen as much in Rune up to this point, but we're playing a lot of the good neutral spells, good neutral follower in Erd and Rico, so altogether great stuff. You can check out the deck log page using the code in the bottom right or the link in the description. It's going to be 58KQ2. Take a look at the Evolve deck real quick. Pretty typical, not quite 5 2-ofs. Since Ryo's a 7-drop, we're only playing one of his Evolve, and we're opting for 3 Merlin instead. Merlin, you'll see, works fantastic in this deck. Lots of good targets, and we really want the card advantage off of it. So, really good one to have 3 copies of here. Our curve is pretty low, as is normal with these sort of rune spell decks. We have 12 2-drops, 9 3-drops. That's where the vast majority of our spells are concentrated. 7 4-drops, because that's where Lishenna herself is. And then just a couple 5, 6, and 7s to round out the top end. We have 18 followers, 20 spells, 2 amulets. We don't care about spell chain, at all in this deck. So, we don't really need any critical mass of spell count. We're just playing the ones that are good. And 18 followers, which is kind of standard. 15 to 18 is pretty standard for Rune. But we're playing followers that just have lots of removal effects, lots of card advantage effects to get us there. Looking in depth, first up we have 3 Angelic Snipe. This card has seen play in the dedicated control decks. Sometimes Haven and Rune will play it. Otherwise hasn't really seen much play since set 1 widespread. But I think that's going to change with this set because there are a lot of good aggressive followers that have 2 defense. Servant of Usurpation, Valnarek, and Fina come to mind as cards just from set 5 that are going to be seeing a lot of play this set, and you're really going to want to have early game answers to them. I put 3 Angelic Snipe in this list just as sort of simplification, but you can play Lamplet Training here or a combination. It's not going to change how the deck plays at all, because we're not playing any additional support for either of them. We don't have room for carrots in our Evolve deck, and we're not running Gilnelise. But running either one could force your opponent to play as though you are. Lamplet Training potentially threatens 3 damage. Angelic Snipe potentially threatens Face Burn if you have Gilnelise in the deck, who's the other neutral legendary in the set. Or if you play a mixture of both, which I've seen a lot of lists do, it opens up the possibility that you're playing 4 or more 1 cost 2 damage spells, even though we're only actually playing 3. So you can mess around with that however you want for, you know, information purposes. I just have the 3 Angelic Snipes in here because it makes the deck list simpler to make an image for, basically. But yeah, good card. You're going to need it for the aggro matchups. Next up, we have Destructive Refrain. This is a 1-cost spell. Choose one of the following. Search your deck for a Lishenna, Omen of Destruction. It's going to be obviously our main key card for the strategy, so having a 4th and 5th copy of it in the deck is great for consistency. Option 2, pay 2 play points. Deal X to each enemy follower on the field. X equals the number of idolatry cards on your field. These are the 4 idolatry cards we could potentially have on our field. I don't expect the followers to stick around for terribly long. There's a lot of removal in this format. The amulets probably will, but paying 3 play points for a 2 damage sweeper is not fantastic. It may come up every now and then, but it's not enough that I would want to play the 3rd copy of this card. I would rather just have it here as a 4th and 5th Lishenna if I need to search it, and every now and then the sweeper effect might be relevant. Maybe if your Lishenna lives, you can push up one of the amulets and plays. You can't even push up both of them and play this on turn 5, so probably pretty hard to have 3 or more until much later in the game. Maybe you play a Servant after you have your amulets down, and then also a Destructive Refrain. Again, it's just not enough that I think we need 3, but if you're okay with going to 41 cards, this is probably the easiest 41st card to add a 3rd copy of. Our other 1-drop is Gingerbread House. 1-cost amulet, fanfare, give your leader +3 defense. Again, there's a lot of aggro decks that we need to worry about, so playing this on turn 1, especially if you go first, don't have anything to remove yet anyway, basically counteracts like 1 or 2 hits from the aggro decks, from like 1 or 2 attack followers. So really good at just slowing them down that way. And we do play Concentration as a like small Earthright package here, which is more leader defense that draws us a card. But we can use the Earthright effect on it to sack our Gingerbread House, clear out our board space to draw an additional card. So a little bit of synergy there. Just helps us against the aggro decks, helps us play a longer game. We are really shooting for like a long game where we're trying to burn our opponent out over the course of a, 10 or 12 turns. 3 copies of Agnes Tachyon. This card is just straight up staple in Rune. It's fantastic. It's even better in this deck because we don't actually care how many spells are in our cemetery. 2 cost 2/2. Whenever you play a spell, select an enemy follower on the field, give it -1/-1. That makes all of our removal spells just even better. All of a sudden, they're all doing effectively 1 extra damage that can be split anywhere. It means that we can play stuff like Destructive Refrain to search Lishenna and kill like a 1/1 at the same time. There are some good, 1 defense followers right now. Just overall really good, especially if we're like multi-spelling or we're evolving a Merlin. Just gets us extra damage that really adds up over time. It's also, since it's minus attack as well, even if we're not straight up removing our opponent's follower, we're still taking less damage. So it's effectively a heal built in as well. It evolves for 1 into a 3/3 on evolve. Select a spell in your cemetery and add it to your hand. This is going to let us recur basically any of our removal, any of our life gain. There's some really good 2-cost spells that are super efficient to add back off of Agnes and then almost immediately cast, that make this card feel very powerful. Our other 2-cost follower is the Servant of Destruction. This is a 2-cost 2/2 fanfare. If there are at least 3 idolatry cards on your field, change this card's Evo cost to 0 for the rest of the turn. I've seen a lot of conflicting opinions on this card. A lot of people thinking it's not very good. The way that I look at this card is because it evolves for 2, so it's 4 play points total. It does evolve into a 4/4. I look at this card the same way I look at the cards like Dragon Warrior, where the 3/3s that evolve for 1 into 4/4s. Because basically you can just hard play this on 3 going second or 4 going first. I look at it the same way as those. Those cards are fine. This card's fine in that same context. However, this card can, on turn 2, just be played as a 2/2, and if it lives, you can evolve it and play another spell on turn 3. Whether you go first or second. If you go first, you can play a 1-cost spell. If you go second, you can play a 2-cost spell by using an Evo point. But from turn, say, 5 onwards, once you get your amulets out here, he's going to evolve for 0, so now your Dragon Warrior costs 2. And I think that's where this card starts getting really powerful, is like turn 5 onward, but it's still decent enough turns 2 and 3. And 4. 4 you want to play Lishenna, but if you have to play this on 4, that's fine. As I said, it evolves into a 4/4. On evolve, deal 2 to an enemy follower and its leader. So this is a little extra chip burn damage. It's not as great in terms of removal, but the decks you want to be using this against are the decks that are playing aggressive like 2/2s and 3/2s anyway. So this is still probably killing the things you care about the most. And against the decks that are playing 4/4s, he's still a 4/4 body that can trade into them. And since we're winning through burn damage usually, we don't need all of our followers to be able to hit face. Trading a 4/4 into our opponent's follower and like 1-for-1ing that way is perfectly fine. Card is still really good against like Floral Fencer and stuff as well, because you can put the 4/4 into the Floral Fencer and use the 2 damage to kill the Steelclad Knight. It just keeps you alive, keeps you in the game, and slowly burns your opponent out. So I think it's really good in the deck as a whole. Our 2-cost spells, we have 3 copies of Monochromatic Destruction. This is 2-cost quick spell. Select an enemy follower on the field, deal it 2 damage. And if there are at least 2 Idolatry cards on your field, deal 2 to its leader and give your leader +2 defense. Again, the Idolatry cards that could be on our field. Once we have the 2 amulets out from probably turn 5 or later, this card is always live. Paying 2 for 2 damage to an enemy follower doesn't seem very good, but when you factor like everything the spell does as a whole, dealing 2 to your opponent and gaining you 2 defense is a 4, like a total 4 swing, which is kind of a lot for a 2-cost spell, and you're also chipping away at your opponent's followers. It makes this really good to add back off Agnes Tachyon or flashback off of Merlin's Evolve. Even though it's not a ton of enemy follower damage, every time you play this to gain 2 and deal 2 to your opponent just makes the game that much harder for your opponent to come back in. Because that's a 4 is a lot. 4 is a really big swing overall, especially when it's you gaining defense in part of it, because that's actively counteracting your opponent killing you, which is what this deck wants to do. This deck wants to not die. So yeah, I think it's great just to, like, you know, if your opponent has a 4/4 and you have to play this twice, that's fine. That kills their 4/4 and deals 4 to them and gains you 4. So I think this card's really powerful overall, especially moving into the later game once you do have those Idolatry cards on your field. I think playing this early as just shoot something for 2 is pretty bad, but the extra text on it is super powerful. Our other 2-cost spell, the one that we do want to be playing early, is Surefire Bullet. 2-cost quick timing, deal 3 to an enemy follower. If it's evolved, deal 4. There are a lot of good 4 defense evolves that already existed, and this set gave us even more. Octrice, Rulanai, and Cat Cannoneer just as some examples, and trust me, there's plenty of others. In addition to all the existing followers, Draconeer, Alice, Floral Fencer, Rose Gardener, Dragon Warrior, the list goes on. Surefire Bullet kills everything. That's why we play 3 of them. We always want to see this card. It doesn't get as good to like flashback off Merlin because we have 3-cost 4 damage spells. But just drawing these early and having them as removal to keep our opponent off the field is really important, really strong for us. Definitely a card we want a lot of. Merlin herself, the probably just best legendary Rune has gotten from set 1 just onward. 3-cost 3/2 Fanfare, search your deck for a spell, reveal it, add it to your hand. Helps you get removal spells to hand, it replaces itself. It also lets us search a lot of the just one-of spells that we have that are a little harder to find otherwise. Things like Execution or Truth's Adjudication, which are just very niche cards that you don't want to draw a bunch of. Merlin can find them for you. She evolves for 2 into a 4/3. On evolve, you select a spell that costs 3 or less in your cemetery and play it for 0. I don't have a slide showing any because they're all good. This can get you removal, or it can get you life gain, or it can get you card draw. Oftentimes, this can be getting you removal that has like extra text on it. So either removal that draws you a card, or removal that gains you a life, or removal that deals damage to your opponent. And you just get all that for free, basically. Makes this card insane. It's card advantage because you're getting to cast a card without spending anything out of hand. And if that card is drawing you a card, then it's just like increasing your hand size to do text, which is phenomenal. So we're playing 3. We're playing 3 Merlin evolves because if we evolve 3 Merlins in a game, we aren't unhappy about it at all. That's just what we want to do, is get as many casts out of our spells as possible. We play 1 concentration. Give your leader +3 defense, draw a card. This is a nice spell to just slam if your opponent doesn't have anything threatening on board, because it draws you a card and gains you leader defense that they have to chip through. It's especially good with the Gingerbread House, because if you put Gingerbread House down, you can sack it to draw an extra card. Basically means that the Gingerbread House now replaces itself, in addition to giving you 3 more defense. So that's just really good. This is also a nice card to get back off Merlin if you don't need to like remove anything specifically, because then even just drawing 1 card is card advantage, and 3 defense to your leader. The next 3 cost spell we play is Craving's Splendor. This is one of the new spells from the set. 3 cost quick timing. We don't care about the first line of text on it because we don't play Gilnelise. The relevant text is deal 4 to an enemy follower and give your leader +1 defense. So this is still going to hit all of those followers that we talked about with Surefire Bullet. It's also going to hit unevolved 4 defense followers, which is things like Tin Soldier is pretty relevant. And it gains us a defense in addition. So again, just really nice card to get back off of Merlin, since it can get us removal that just has extra runner text on it, especially just a better Surefire Bullet to get back off your removal. It is, however, a worse monochromatic destruction if you only need to deal 2 damage to remove something, so keep that in mind. Next, we have Truth's Adjudication. 3 cost, choose one of the following. If you have 2 mage followers on your field, choose up to 2 instead. Option 1, draw 2 cards. Option 2, deal 3 to each enemy leader. Option 3, deal 3 to an enemy follower. This is essentially just Demonic Strike and Fate's Hand combined into 1 card. Since you get to choose either of their modes. You lose the quick timing on Fate's Hand and the spell chain to recover a play point, but it's fine. You're gaining deck space out of it, because you're combining these 2, like, usually one-ofs down into 1 one-of slot, which is great. It's still a card that we can search off of Merlin. We can flash it back off of Merlin. A lot of times on like turn 8, this can turn into a win condition for you. You can play Merlin, search it, 3 your opponent, Evo Merlin, 3 your opponent again. That's 6 burn damage. And it's not going to come up a lot that you get the choose 2 modes text, because there's only 2 different mage followers that we play. But Ryo does have the potential to enable it, since he lets us play a lot of cards for free in a turn. If we ever play Ryo and get to play a Merlin for free and Truth Adjudication for free, we'll get to choose 2 modes. But generally, this is just a card that you're choosing whichever mode is most relevant at the time. Don't be afraid to play this to just draw 2 cards early if you don't need to remove anything on your opponent's board. We want this card to just end up in our cemetery pretty much, so that Merlin can flash it back for 3 burn damage at some point. Next, we have Witch Bolt, another removal spell. 3 cost, deal 5 to an enemy follower, and if you have an evolved follower, draw a card. 5's a nice number to hit things like Ancient Elf, Prime Dragon Keeper. There's a few things that are like 5/5s. Olivia is a 5/5. That's kind of a big one that comes up. And then if you have an evolved follower, draw a card. Because of the way this deck works, it's actually really easy to have an evolved follower, despite the fact that we're not a follower-focused deck. Because we have a lot of evolved followers that either put spells back in our hand or let us cast spells for free. Somebody like Agnes Tachyon can buy this back and then you just jam it and surprise you have Agnes Tachyon. If Merlin targets this, she is just instantly an evolved follower to fulfill the condition. And same with Ryo, if his effect lets you play it for free, he is an evolved follower. So they just all meet the condition themselves by letting you play it, which means that your Witch Bolt replaces itself. So you're getting 5 damage removal, which is a premium number, for no cards out of hand. So great, just really good card. We play 2 because we don't want to be searching the first one off Merlin. We want to be playing the first one on that turn, basically. Especially if your opponent makes the really early, like, big Ancient Elf. You want to just kill it immediately before they can start pumping it with anything else. And then you want to start flashing them back off Merlin, not searching them. So yeah, great card. Play 2 of it. We don't want to clog on them. It's kind of the issue. It's a 3 cost. 3 cost spell. 3 does not sound like a big number, but 3 cost spells are kind of expensive in this deck. Moving into 4 drops, we have our main star of the show, our idol, the idolatry trait, Lishenna, Omen of Destruction. 4 cost, 2/4. Has 1 effect, Fanfare. Put a destruction in white and a destruction in black token into your EX area. Those are both amulet tokens. Destruction in white costs 1. Start of your main phase, give your leader +2 defense. Destruction in black costs 2. Start of your main phase, deal 2 to each enemy leader. This is our win condition. Similar to how monochromatic destruction, a 4 defense swing is a lot. If you just every main phase, they lose 2, you gain 2. You know, start out both players at 20. First time you do it, they're at 18, you're at 22. Then they're at 16, you're at 24. 16 to 24 is like, that's a big gap. That's after 2 turns. That is already decently hard to come back from, and it doesn't stop. It's just every turn you're going to keep doing this. There are matchups where you can probably play a second Lishenna to put a second Destruction in black out to deal 4 damage and gain 2 every turn, if you find enough time to do that. Otherwise, you're just putting 1 of each out. Extra Lishennas are just kind of there as backups in case your opponent has amulet removal. These are pretty hard to interact with. The only amulet removal you're going to see, it's either Execution or Machikane Tannhauser or Bahamut. Or hoping your opponent doesn't Erd them the turn that you play Lishenna. It's relevant in the mirror, and it's actually part of the reason we play Erd in this list. But Lishenna, overall, she's our win condition. We want to see her. We want to get this set up. Problem is that it's slow. We'd have to like tap out for a 2/4 on turn 4, which is not great. She doesn't even have... If she had a ward, this would be so much easier because we could just ward her and not care if she dies, but she doesn't. And then we have to pay 3 more to actually get the amulets out. So our turn 5 a lot of the times is play both amulets, and we only have 2 play points to work with. So we're going to take a lot of damage early, especially from aggro decks, and that is why we have so much heal in the deck to try to counteract that. Looking at Erd, we play 3 copies, which is a ton for a card that has barely seen any play since set 1. This card kind of saw like fringe play in set 3 as like an answer to the Fable decks, because they use their EX area so much. But in this deck, it's actually really powerful. 4 cost 2/2 is bad stats, but again, we don't care about stats in this deck because we're not really swinging at our opponent. We're just burning them out with all of our effect damage. Fanfare, you choose an enemy follower, put it into their EX area. This is good at kind of just like time walking our opponent's 4 drops, especially if they don't have good on play effects. We just make them spend their entire turn to play their card again, which is great. It's easy. It's just a removal spell tied to a body. Dodges last words. But the real fun is when we start evolving it into a 3/3. On evolve, you banish any card in your opponent's EX area. So in the mirror, if our opponent plays Lishenna on 4 and then passes, we're either on 4 with an Evo point or 5. We can play Erd, Evo, banish their destruction in black. So now they can heal, but they don't have a way to chip us down. So we will eventually, hopefully win just by them not being able to kill us. Against the Fable decks, you can hit the Tin Soldier or whatever other valuable card they have in their EX area. Against Usurpation Sword, which is one of the new archetypes, their boss Octrice steals cards from the opponent's cemetery, puts them in EX area. If they don't play it immediately, you can Erd to get rid of it, and sort of try to shut them down from stealing any of your powerful cards. Other matchups, like, you can hit things like Leonidas, right? So that it doesn't get two last words, make the amulet. It's also just good removal against enormous followers that you can't answer with damage. Things like Israfil, Bahamut, whatever else. Shove them back, Evo, banish them. Um, it's just instant sort of removal that way for 5. Execution, similarly, destroys any card on the enemy field for quick timing 4 cost. This card is, again, really good at just answering giant things like Israfils and Bahamuts that you don't want to be killing with damage. It's also one of our only, or actually our only answer to amulets that have already stuck on the field. So in the mirror, again, if our opponent plays Lishenna and does get to move up the amulets, execution to destroy the destruction in black is the way that we're going to sort of pull ahead. Or actually, execution destroy the destruction in white means that they're going to be able to die, and we're just healing off their destruction in black every turn, so that might be the better play. Destroy the destruction in white, win that way by burning them out. Can destroy Leonidas' resolve so that you don't die to giant overstated sword followers that you can't kill with damage removal. It's still good against like Discard Dragon, they have Dracomancer's Rights, and Dragon Song Flute. It's good against Ilana Heelhaven, it's good against, whatever else is playing amulets. It's also one of our only ways to answer Elephant King, because once we get to the late game, this deck is going to go to the late game, it's going to be able to evolve, and we don't want to just die to like a 15-15 Elephant. Execution is mandatory to remove it at that point. We only play 1 because we can search it with Merlin. We can keep buying it back off of like Agnes Tachyon. And we don't need to be playing it so many times that we need multiple copies. We can just find the first one and hopefully be fine from there. We play 2 copies of Alchemical Lore. This is basically Themis Decree or Serpent Wrath, but worse. It's 5 cost, deal 4 to each enemy follower. It doesn't hit our own stuff, but in this deck, I don't think we would really care if we were hitting our own stuff that much. So, a little worse than the other board wipes that other classes have, but it is still our only board wipe nonetheless, so we kind of have to play it. We have Destructive Refrain, but that one doesn't deal enough damage consistently. This is always 4. This kills 4/4s. If you have Agnes Tachyon out, it can kill an X5. But even if your opponent has gone wide and has a big follower, it's like an X6 or an X7, you can oftentimes, it's going to be late enough in the game that you can play Alchemical Lore and an Angelic Sniper and a Surefire Bullet to remove whatever the one thing that Alchemical Lore can't answer is. Not many decks are making full wide boards that Alchemical Lore can't kill. And again, you can search this off of Merlin. We play 2 because there are probably matchups, right? Sword and Abyss especially, where we would rather just jam this on 5 to clear out whatever 3 or 4 followers they have and hope they can't rebuild after that. And we don't want to be wasting time searching for it in those cases. We play 1 copy of Riko Kashimoto, Planned Perfection. Because our game plan is long-term burn with amulets, we are pretty likely to just not have a follower on the field, which means that Riko's Strike is very easily active. She's a 6 cost 6/6 rush. Strike if there's no other followers on your field. Destroy an enemy follower, deal 3 to its leader. So this really just fits in with everything we want to do. A 6/6 that trades super favorably and destroys any other enemy follower is great at keeping our opponent off the board so they can't kill us. Dealing 3 to their leader is just additional burn damage that's going to speed up our win condition. And if they can't remove whatever Riko is left at afterwards, the 6/6 can just swing in for game. So this card fits really well with all of our sort of strategy that we already have. Lastly, we have the 7-drop Ryo Omen of Truth. He is the 9th Omen. We will be covering him in his own deck that's dedicated to his strategy. Here, he's just kind of a splashy finisher. We're not really building around him at all. 7 cost 7/7, Fanfare, discard a Mage card. Deal 9 to an enemy follower. You might not always be able to do this, but it is a nice way to be able to answer. Even if you don't need the 9, answering like a 5/5 or a 6/6 is really great off of this. The Mage cards we have, there's 6 of them. Merlin, Concentration, Truth's Adjudication, Witchbolt, Alchemical Lore, and Ryo himself. A lot of these are one-ofs, two-ofs, so you might not have the card to discard, like I said, but if you do, you can get the 9 damage. If you don't, oh well. Main thing he's here for is evolve for 2 into a 9/9. On evolve, look at top 9 of your deck, put up to 3 cards that cost 3 or less into your EX area. They cost 3 less to play this turn, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this means he has effectively draw 3 and play them for free. He just casts 3 spells. So even if we don't have the 9 damage, you're playing this guy, evolving him, and getting essentially 18 play points worth of value in a single turn. And the spells he can get, cards. He can get cards, doesn't have to be spells. So he can get Merlin, he can get Agnes Tachyon. You can't evolve them same turn, but he can get them. And just, you can sit them in your EX area, and even if you don't play them for free, you basically drew them, and you can play them next turn for whatever their actual cost is, and get value that way. But things he can just immediately cast for free: removal, Craving Splendor, Witch Bolt, both great removal spells to get for free off of him. And the nice thing about this is a lot of times when you're playing a follower and evolving it, you are turning it sideways to kill an enemy follower. If Ryo is already getting you this much removal on his own, you probably don't have to attack with him immediately, which means he's going to stay reserved as a 9/9, which is very difficult to remove, and could just turn sideways and kill your opponent on the next turn if they don't have an answer for him. Additional things you could get: Gingerbread House and Concentration, which are both heal, so Ryo could just represent a lot of leader defense gain that makes it harder for your opponent to kill you. So even if they answer the Ryo, you've dragged the game out an additional 3 or 4 turns, which is enough for your amulet burn to finish your opponent off, hopefully. Or he can get you cards like Monochromatic Destruction and Truth's Adjudication that can just deal damage straight to your opponent's face. If you get, say, 2 Monochromatic Destruction and Truth's Adjudication off this guy, that immediately represents 7 burn damage to their face. Not likely you're going to get exactly that when you only play 3 and 1 copies, but, you know, these cards could show up and could represent immediate burn damage against your opponent, which is super relevant, can help you kill them. Looking at the pros and cons of the deck. Pros, we have a super big removal suite that can answer a wide variety of threats. We have sweepers, we have damage at basically every number up to 5. We have execution and Erd that can answer just anything. So lots of removal that is going to keep our opponent off board, hopefully. We have lots of healing built into cards that already have other functions, so we're not just wasting time healing and accomplishing nothing else. Monochromatic Destruction and Craving's Splendor are both removal. Lishenna is getting us 2 heal a turn once we put her amulet out. Concentration is a draw spell that heals us. Gingerbread House does only heal us, but it can fuel extra draw in Concentration. So lots of healing. It's going to make it hard for our opponent to kill us while we keep answering all their threats. And we went through burn damage instead of combat most of the time, so it's really hard for opposing removal to matter. It's not like we're swinging in with Storm followers that could die to, you know, our opponent's Surefire Bullet or whatever. We're just burning them with things that they can't interact with mostly. Cons of the deck. It is slow to set up. Again, you have to pay 4 for the Lishenna and then 3 additional after that for the amulets. So it does leave us weak to aggro strategies, which is why we have to have so much cheap removal to keep the aggro decks off long enough for us to get set up. And since we are mostly chip damage, like burn 2s and 3s, mostly burn 2s, it's hard to kill opponents that have a lot of healing. If you think about it right, Dragon, a Sybil sitting on board counteracts our burn damage just every turn on its own, while they're setting up whatever other things. So any sources of healing that our opponent has, we have to answer as fast as possible, if possible. Otherwise, you know, things like Dragon Nest are hard to get through. Shenlong, like, you can't stop it from healing them 5. It does drag the game out. You know, 5 heal is 3 extra turns of burn damage that we need. So it can drag the game out long enough to where we either run out of removal or our opponent just finds an uninteractive way to kill us. That's not great. We don't want that to happen, but sometimes it's hard to avoid. Deck as a whole, again, you can check out the deck log page using the code in the bottom corner, 58KQ2. the Evolve deck. And thank you for watching. There should be some other videos on the screen that you can watch while you wait for my next ones to come out. I'm going to be going through all the Omens for sure with the new set. Outside of Majera Bane and Gilnelis, like I said, I'll be looking at the 8 that are part of specific classes. I'll also be covering at least 2 or 3 other decks that I've already thought of from the set. So over the next, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks, expect at least a few videos a week on new decks. Again, thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you'd like to see in the comments down below.